Bushido is a miniature game, combat at the skirmish level. It is set in a fantasy-like old Japan with ghosts and dragons and things like that. And, well, it seemed interesting. The theme seemed interesting. The rulebook is not long, so I thought, well, why don't I have a look at it? And you can download it online for free. You can print your own copy. The miniatures are very attractive, so all these things made me curious about this game, made me want to try the game, and try I did. And now, after I played the game, I have a lot of things I want to tell you about Bushido, so let's keep this introduction short and let's start talking about the game right now. Each character in the game is identified by a card, such as this one, which you need to place in a plastic sleeve because you will need to write on the cards. Here you have, well, the illustration that represents the character, of course, the name, but here we have relevant stats. This number represents the number of dice that the character can roll in melee combat. This is the number of dice the character rolls when attacking with range attacks. That means that this character doesn't have range attacks. Number of inches that the character can move by spending a move action. And these are chi points. These are used for certain types of tests. And also they are a resource that you can spend to perform specific feats. These are special actions that the character can perform. These are often unique and they have a cost in chi points, so you deduct those points from your total. Also, as you can see, some stats may have a number of chi symbols by them. That is the number of chi points that you need to spend to increase the number in the stats by 1. In this case, if she spends 3 chi points, she can roll 4 dice in melee combat. The number to the right of the slash is the maximum amount of chi points the character can have. And this number here is the number of points that the character regenerates at the beginning of each turn. So as you can see, she doesn't regenerate very fast. Other characters are more chi-oriented. For example, this scary ghost woman starts with 8 chi points and also regenerates 3 each turn. But Jin is mainly a warrior type. Characters have traits that can come in handy in a lot of situations. Some of the traits may also be negative. Traits are things that are always there, they're always active. For example, she has an armor that will protect her during combat. Bravery is good when taking fear tests, and so on and so forth. I already talked about the feats. And here you have here you may have a modifier to the damage roll after the character has hit the opponent. Also, you may have special moves, and they may be attack moves or defensive moves that can be performed during combat. When you take into account these options here, then these options are based on sacrificing dice. You roll a certain amount of dice when you are attacking or defending. If you remove a die from your pool, then you can execute one of the special actions printed here. Jin only has one. Other characters are more versatile, they have more such actions. So as you can see, there are different types of resources that you can use to perform special moves. Chi points or reducing the amount of dice that you roll in combat. And here you have the number of health points that the character has. When the character goes down to 0, the character is removed from the board. During a turn, players will alternate activating their models one at a time, but differently from many other games here, models do not have to activate only once per turn. There are many cases in which a model may be able to activate more than once. This is because a model, a character in the game, will always be in one of 3 possible conditions. So the character is rested, fresh, and the character, it's not tired, can do a lot of things. The character may be tired, which I marked with a red marker, in case the character performed a simple action, or the character may be exhausted, in case the character performed a complex action or 2 simple actions. That means when you perform an action, it can be complex or simple, and a simple action will worsen your condition by 1 level, from rested to tired, from tired to exhausted. The complex actions will worsen your condition by 2. That also means that if you're tired already, your next action can only be a simple action. You cannot execute a complex action anymore. So as you can see, there are different ways in which you can manipulate the way in which the turn goes. You may execute an action with one character, and then you execute a lot of actions with other characters, so that that character still has a simple action available to react to whatever happens in the meanwhile on the other side of the battlefield. Possible simple actions are to disengage from base-to-base combat with an enemy model. In this case, however, you have to defend against the model, and then if you're successful, you can disengage from the opponent. You can execute a simple chi feat. Chi feats are simple or complex. You can engage in melee. You declare the melee against an enemy model. You can move up to your full movement allowance, and if at the end of movement you in base-to-base combat with an opponent, then you can attack in melee. You can also declare a range attack as a simple action if you have range attacks, and you can also move up to your full movement allowance in the same action with a range attack before or after you resolve the range attack. You can reload if you have a weapon that needs to be reloaded. You may run. In that case, you move up to 1.5 times your movement allowance. That is a simple action, but you need to mark with some sort of marker. I use green markers, characters that run in a turn, because the character is less effective in melee. The character has a penalty when engaged in melee after running. You may also have simple scenario actions. In this game, usually victory is not determined on eliminating enemy models per se, but on performing certain actions in specific areas of the board. So you need to gain position to keep the enemies at bay, so that you can perform your own actions. Possibly you need to prevent the opponents from accomplishing their own goals. But really it is a matter of budgeting actions. You may spend all of your actions defending and attacking, and still you have neglected the other basic actions that you actually need to win the game. I like that added level of challenge that added level of budgeting resources that you have to do when you're trying to decide which models are the best suited to spend their actions to perform certain tasks during a turn, and in order to complete the objectives of the scenario. Of course, there's also the very simple action of walking, that is to move up to your full movement allowance. Complex actions, well, some scenario actions may be complex actions, so it takes 2 levels of fatigue to accomplish them. You may charge. That means that you can move up to twice your movement allowance. You can move on in a straight line, but if then you reach base contact with an opponent, you attack with a bonus because you charged. You can also concentrate, and in that case you regain chi tokens. It is a pretty expensive way of regaining them because it costs 2 actions pretty much, or 2 levels of fatigue, but there may be cases in which you may want to do that. Another interesting thing is that if you attack an opponent in melee and the opponent is not exhausted yet, you worsen the level of fatigue of the opponent. When you're attacking an enemy in range combat, you look at the card of the character that is firing, and you look at these 3 numbers that indicate the maximum distance in inches for short range, medium range, and long range. Once you have determined the range of which you're firing, you look at the stable, and that tells you the number to hit, the number you're trying to match or exceed with your die roll in order to hit the opponent. There are several factors that may modify the number to hit. Tiny or small targets will have a higher number to hit. Other types of targets will lower the number to hit. If the active model runs this turn, then the active model has a penalty. Once you have your final number to hit, you roll a number of dice equal to your range stats. In this case, it would be 3. It can be modified by things such as chi boosts, some feats, not this one, by the way. Then you roll your dice and you look at the highest number, the highest result. And you can use, if you have more than one die, you can use up to 2 as modifiers of the first number, of the highest number. Numbers from 2 to 5, from 2 to 5 can be used to lend a +1 to the highest number. Only results of 1 do not give you modifiers. In this case, the total result is 8. 6 plus 1 plus 1 is 8. If you have 6s, then those can be used as +2 on the highest number. And in this case, I would have 6 plus 2 is 8 and plus 1 is 9, which is a very good shot. If you hit the opponent, the level of success is the difference between the number that you rolled and the number to hit, and based on that you will roll on a different column on the success table, and that will determine the amount of damage that you inflict on the opponent. When you resolve melee, you will look at the number of dice that the players roll, and that is indicated on their cards. That may be modified by chi boosts, by other game effects. And once you have the final pools, then each player has to decide how many dice their character will use in attack and defense. Unless there are specific game effects, the attacker will get to attack first and defender to defend. That seems obvious, but the point is that if then the defender is still alive, during the same melee combat triggered by the opponent, the defender will get to attack back. So suppose that after all the modifiers have been taken into account, Hiro Takashi is rolling 5 dice in this melee. He decides to launch a very powerful attack. During his attack, and he decides to commit 4 dice to that attack, and he saves 1 die for defense, so when the defender, if still alive, will get to fight back. This is also the pool from which the player could choose to remove a die to perform a special move among those indicated at the bottom of the card. But suppose we have 4 for attack and 1 saved for defense. The Armor Kirai has 3 dice, and he decides to defend with 2 against the attack of the opponent, and to save 1 to attack back after the attack of the attacker is resolved. So now we roll the dice of both players. As you can see, it is useful to have different types of dice, and we count the total the same way we did for range combat. The defender here is a 4 without modifiers, because that's a 1, never works as a modifier. Here we have a 6, and then we can use these 2 numbers as modifiers, 7 and 8, +1 and +1. So we have 4 versus 8. The attack is higher than the defense. We have a success level of 4, difference between the defender's roll and the attacker's roll, and the attacker now rolls on the damage table using the success level column number 4. Of course, the higher your success level, the better it is the column on which you're rolling in on the damage table. After this is resolved and damage is applied, if the defender is still alive, then the defender can attack back, and in this case you use the attack dice that the defender has saved and the defense die, the die or dice that the attacker has saved. In this case, well, we have same number, a success level of 0, not a very exciting column to roll on the damage table. It is the smallest possible result. As you can see, that doesn't have to be. There may be cases in which the defender may come back quite brutally, quite violently, and quite effectively against the opponent. In this case, the defender will have a success level of 4, which is pretty good when you're rolling on the damage table. I already mentioned some of the reasons why I find this game very appealing in my previous segments. Combat is simple, it is intuitive, yet it is just shining with options. You have resources that you can spend in different ways, your dice, your chi points. Of course, every character fights in a different way with different styles, with pluses and minuses. But the fact that in each round of combat you can decide how you want to approach the fight, and even as the defender, you have very relevant decisions to make, and you have a chance of coming back. If you just defend effectively, then you may be able to deal some damage or to gain some tactical advantage by pushing the opponent, by trying to take control of the mind of the opponent, by creating all sort of effects that the characters can generate. At the same time, this did not feel fiddly at all. There are the games where you have a lot of characters' abilities in which I find myself just going through the list and getting a little confused, having a hard time patching all the abilities together in a consistent, coherent system in which everything is clear to me and everything is and feels available. Here, really, I just felt the characters came alive through the mechanics, and that to me was great. I like the turn system, an interesting variation of the I go you go system with more subtleties, more nuances, again more decisions to make about when you're going to spend your actions on certain characters and what type of actions, how much you're going to fatigue your characters in a certain area of the board and save other characters for later. These are things that are common to I go you go skirmish games, but here the fact that characters can activate multiple times per turn adds an all new level of decision and of strategy. They're just all of these things that come together very well. I played with two starter sets, the Prefecture of Ryu, and which is sort of like the soldiers of... My phone is ringing. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. The Prefecture of Ryu, which is pretty much warriors and soldiers. So they have leaders, they have strong will, and then the Cult of Yurei, which is the magicians, wizards, and the undead. Some of these people just would not stay dead. And actually I find them to be good antagonists because the people from the prefecture have strong will, strong ability to control their fear, and they are able to deal with these zombies pretty much that indeed have the power of inflicting great fear. It's a nice challenge there. I have to say, of course, that with the two starter sets, I found myself pretty much playing with the same characters game after game. There weren't enough characters to customize and to change much from scenario to scenario, but it was a great way to get introduced to the mechanics. Actually, I have a couple of extra miniatures, but still, I found that to have a good battle, I needed to use pretty much all the miniatures that I have, maybe -1. So I ordered more miniatures for the Ryu and the Yurei. Even before I start exploring other parties, other factions, I want to see how these two factions work when you start combining, mixing and matching different models from game to game. Bushido is definitely an excellent miniature game. It is not very well known, but take a minute to have a look at it, look into it, see if it may be for you, because definitely this is a game that is for me, a game that I enjoyed a lot. One of my favorite tactical miniature games at the time, and I'm definitely going to play it more in the future.